What is your hearing today? What's left to be decided, sir?
Well, great question, and let's just begin with the fact that we kick off budget season, as we call it, with the disclosure of the president's budget. The president will propose a budget every year. It's been going on forever. And then the Congress looks at the president's priorities and then does its own thing. So the House realistically is supposed to do a budget. The Senate is supposed to do a budget. And then the two budgets, which will be different, can get together, and we'll try to come up with a concurrent resolution where we can resolve all the differences between what the Senate thinks we ought to do, what the House thinks we ought to do. Remember, the Article I powers of the Constitution gives this authority to Congress, not the president. So it's important to hear his priorities, but that's essentially what this document does. Now, to your question about the budget deal from last week, just to kind of set that apart, what we did was we agreed on what we call the top line numbers, the 302A numbers, as we say in budget speak, which establishes the discretionary spending for the remainder of this year and for all of 2019. So that is out of the way, as it were, unless and until the Congress decides to do something different, which is probably not in the cards. So what my job is as a House budget chairman is to lead my committee through developing a budget resolution that will take into consideration the presidential priorities, but at the same time give Congress its ability to take a bite at that apple and to determine what we think ought to happen to put America on a different glide path from a fiscal perspective. And that deals with discretionary spending, which the caps we've already set as of last week, but also deals with the potential for changing the 70% of the budget that we call mandatory, where we find our social safety net programs. And we have a tool in our budget process called reconciliation that we've used in the past, and we can use once every budget resolution to change some of those mandatory programs. So that's how this process unfolds, and it's now the Congress's time to act.
So that's very helpful. Thank you, sir. Take us into that reconciliation process as you anticipate, and recognizing you're just having your hearings now, nothing set in stone, but you know a lot about this. Anticipating where we're going, what might actually have to go through reconciliation? Will you actually take a look at some so-called entitlements? We've heard talk about Social Security, for example. What is on the table from your perspective?
Well, look, I'm not going to try to prescribe an outcome for my committee. I've got Republicans and Democrats on my committee, and out of that group, we have to come up with what we believe are our ideas. Now, you can hear the chatter from the other end of the Capitol, the Senate wing, that says that they may or may not do a budget this year because we've set the top line numbers on discretionary and they won't change anything on the mandatory side. But if you look at the fiscal glide path of this country, it is not a sustainable formula. And I would say if there was one thing about the president's budget that I would have serious disagreement with is the fact it never balances. It allows for deficits to continue year over year in perpetuity. And we're $20 trillion in debt today. I believe the debt markets are going to have an opportunity to weigh in on the fiscal direction of this country. Interest rates are going to have a major vote in what happens here in Washington, because every time you increase your deficit, which increases your debt and increases your net interest payments, it crowds out a lot of other spending for other things that the American public would like to have. So we've got to have an opportunity to look at these from top to bottom and then come up with what we believe are solutions that can be politically doable, House and Senate, that the president will sign. And that's what the Budget Committee process will begin to do.
Well, I think I can say safely that there are a fair number of people in the business community and also on Wall Street who will be reassured by your concern with the bond market and what happens with interest rates, because there's a lot of talk about that right now with deficit spending. As a practical matter, sir, you're not going to be able to get to a balanced budget within a reasonable period of time without dealing with the mandatory spending, not the discretionary. Understanding you can't speak for your committee, but for you, you believe on the table should be some entitlement reform. Is that correct, sir?
I do believe that, David. I think it's fundamental. And here's why. 70% of what we spend in your tax dollars goes out on autopilot. It's automatic. And it takes a change in law in order to influence any changes in that 70%. And oh, by the way, that number continues to grow because these entitlement programs continue to grow unchecked. We'll put 11,000 people today on the Medicare rolls. So, and we're going to do this for another 15 to 18 years.
Yeah.
So another 30 million plus people will go onto these rolls. Now, we have to create a program that is sustainable. Plus, we've got to be careful not to jerk that rug out from underneath the people that are currently receiving those benefits or nearing retirement and have planned their lives around them. So this is a great challenge for Congress. You can't do this on discretionary spending alone. It's just simply not mathematically possible.